listen, I'm secular, totally secular. I eat chametz and Pesach. I don't fast on Yom Kippur. Having said that, I'm Jewish in all my body and soul. I'm just so Jewish. My allusions are all from Jewish texts, and I live the Jewish text and my Jewish identity every day, every minute.
Hi, welcome to Really Jewish with Yair, Eldon and Oliver Joseph. This is our conversation about what it is to be really Jewish. We're back for another week. If you're here for the first time, Bruchim Habaim. If you're back for another listen, welcome back. We're taking a closer look this week at Yair. Catch up on last week's podcast for a little bit of a closer look on who I am and my journey. This is a podcast where we take a look at some of the big topics that are affecting the Jewish world and specifically how they personally affect us and our own Jewish lives, our journeys, both in friendship and also individually. Yair is a professor in law in Israel. I'm a rabbi in the UK. I'm religious, Yair is secular. Welcome to our conversation about Really Jewish, the next leg. Yair, welcome back.
Hey, Oliver, it's great to be with you.
This week we're looking at you. It's all Yair for the whole podcast. Tell us a little bit about how you've been shaped, Yair, and particularly how Judaism has shaped you.
You come to an age where it's not easy to actually choose one narrative from the narratives you have. I think I could choose several when I think about it. I have an identity narrative connected to the fact that I was born in the U.S. to a American mother and an Israeli father, and came to Beersheba, which is a southern city in Israel, when I was 3 years old. So I'm practically Israeli. And I was an Ashkenazi who was actually living in a very Mizrahi city, in Mizrahi environment, which shaped my life in a lot of ways. I could choose the narrative of the individual with regard to society, and the fact that I feel a lot of my life is around my feeling that I am in the peripheral or marginal place in society. Individual is very important to me. I had a friend, I talked to you about my friend who committed suicide 2 years ago, very dear friend, and I remember we had this artistic plan, and we actually put it forward to ask people, Oliver, to describe their lives in 3 sentences. And I actually tried it in my class in law school, and it's not easy for students to actually describe their lives in 3 sentences. When I had to choose,
I want to hear.
Yeah, exactly. I think I will choose the home narrative. I was born to a home with another 3 boys, not like you, Oliver, that you have sisters and there's, the connection with them was, part of your identity. So I grew up in a very masculine family. My father, 4 boys, and my mother, who tried desperately to, make our femininity more noticed in a way. And she was still a very protective mom, a very Polish mom in a way, in a good way. I mean, the home was a very warm, protective, all-encompassing home. And I remember that I loved home, but at the same time, I needed to burst from it. And it go and find my way, and it shaped my world. When I tried actually to go out, it was involved with, rebellion and breaking a lot of the concepts that I grew on, and connecting this narrative to my Jewishness. I think it's the fact that I felt at home when I studied Torah. Wherever I was, it was when I studied Mishnah, when I studied Talmud, obviously the Bible, beautiful, beautiful text of the Bible. I felt at home wherever I was. So, the metaphor of Sabbath as a temple, Arthur Green, I think, no? Time as place. For me, the text was a place. And I felt it when I was in the army and all sorts of different dangerous places. And I felt it obviously in university and afterwards all the time. So, going out of home, my odyssey was very painful, because I had to distance my parents and my brothers and just to find my identity. And in a way, My life is going back home to my parents, reconciliation with my parents, with my family, with trying to find myself in this very complicated idea of family.
Thanks for opening up. The beginning of your story, it's interesting, noting that this attempt to describe our story in short form, I felt very much walking away from last week's podcast that it was just like very much a beginning, even though we spent 40 minutes just talking about me. I think one of the ways that we frame this podcast is about some kind of individuation, some kind of separation between secular and religious. Just tell us a couple of words about how you identify in those terms, because there's definitely, for those who are not coming from an Israeli background, there's definitely clear terminology in Israeli life that you're either chiloni or dati, you're either religious or you're secular. Those terms are clearly, both in the Jewish world more generally and in Israel, much more complicated when you start to break them down. But you certainly, in the conversations that we've had up until now, identified that you came from a religious home and you became secular. So tell us a little bit about that journey, and also tell us just a couple of words on how you identify now, Puri.
Sure. Listen, I'm secular, totally secular. I eat chametz in Pesach. I don't fast on Yom Kippur. Having said that, I'm Jewish in all my body and soul. I'm just so Jewish. My allusions are all from Jewish texts, and I live the Jewish text and my Jewish identity every day. I mean, every minute. That has a very morbid aspect as well, because I'm also very obsessed with Holocaust and Holocaust stories and Holocaust philosophy that came from this experience, this very extreme experience that our people in the world went through. So I'm secular, but I'm Jewish, and I'm proud Jewish I remember that, I could describe my secularity in terms of going away from my parents and my family. I mean, breaking the rules that I grew up on and everything. To be honest, I remember myself very little, on the one hand, fascinated by Jewish law and wanting to understand, I had this desire to understand everything, but at the same time, I hated the law itself. I mean, doing it. I remember, breaking Shabbat very early in my life, trying to, open the light when it was forbidden, and I was sure the sky will fall on me. And I remember it. It was before first grade, and there is something about me that is, I'm antinomy, against law in a way, but fascinated by it. And it's also connected to my academic work. I always relate to law as something that is very dear to me, and I understand that it's necessary for us to live together. We have to have very strict rules. But at the same time, there is something again inside me. Maybe it's the the artist inside me that is against it, and, always criticizing it, trying to understand it, and sometimes, saying not every law is supposed to be taken, and you don't have to abide the laws, all the laws all the time.
So tell us a little bit more about your journey. You kind of skated across childhood and holding to the text when you were in the army. Tell us a little bit more about your own life path.
Yeah, when I think about, thank you. I mean, when I think about it, life-changing events, I think when I was in sixth grade, I was a very popular, in a good way, very good boy, trying to really, make my parents proud of me, a very nice Yeled Tov Yerushalayim boy. And obviously I had this, feeling that I don't like this position. I remember me and other friends, we started to smoke cigarettes. It was sixth grade. And as a consequences of that, I was ostracized by the guys and girls in Bnei Akiva. And I think that's a very important event in my life. The falling from being very popular to being ostracized, shunned, made me think about, how life is fragile, how cruel people can be. And I became very sensitive. I was sensitive even before, but I became even more sensitive. And this sensitive guy, I always think about Haredi, what you will say they don't want to go to the army because it will threaten their Jewish identity, their Jewish way of life. And I'm looking at this young boy like me, and I was very sensitive. I wasn't a pacifist in no way, but I was sensitive. I was writing poems when I got into the army, and I found myself in very difficult situations, Misamach de dama didach sumak tfei, I say to this to the Haredi who doesn't want to recruit. I was sensitive. I went through it. Everybody is sensitive. It's not easy to anyone. They can't avoid it. The fact that religious people actually act in that way. When I did it and I had my sensitivities. I find it hard to understand and believe.
You're saying that this process of going to the army was a growth process for you to face some of those sensitivities and those perhaps vulnerabilities. That's the description that you're making?
In a way, I wouldn't say growth. Only now when I'm 53, I could say, wow, yeah, I grew up. I had to live up to challenges I would never think I would have to do. To be a commander in a way of young soldiers in very dangerous places where I myself feel that I'm trapped in this situation. I feel that I want to, I'm going to die for nothing. So it was a very complicated, emotionally, psychologically situation for me. Only now I can see that the fact that I survived it made me stronger, like the cliche says. But it also shaped my sensitivities. I saw people when they get the power of weapons, the power of command, they can actually exploit people. I could see that. But I also saw some very inspirational acts and people. So, I was exposed to life in a very deep way, and it did affect me.
So I want to get to the text that you're going to present today, because each week we present just a little segment of Jewish learning. But just tell us two more stop-off places on your way today. This is a very we'll come to this more in the duration of our podcast, because part of the podcast that we present is about our own personal journeys and sharing some of that. But tell us a couple more stop-off places, and then I'd like to get to a little segment of learning, if that's okay.
Sure. I think my divorce, first marriage, was a very milestone in my identity, because I again came back to this feeling of being me against society, me with regard to norms and life in a way. But that's one thing that I had to actually, in the first time of my life, I married very early. You took your time, Oliver. There is advantages and disadvantages in every situation, as we know. But I married very early, and in a way, I wasn't ripe and prepared to a relationship. And when I came out of this marriage, I had to understand who I am, and it took me to a journey, which was also a journey in my first marriage, because I wasn't in my place. I took a lot of time in learning texts. I was into the text. I was living the text. I was living a life, an inner life, all the time. A very Jewish life when you think about it, because I was writing about the connection between excommunication in Jewish texts, and it's part of my history, personal history, and I was stunned to see that the basic text in Jewish rabbinic text about that actually specify all the mourning customs, that you're not allowed to cut your hair, that you're not allowed to put on tefillin before the kvura, that you're not allowed to wash. The context of it is seeing these mourning customs as something that's supposed to discipline the mourner, the person who is mourning, seeing him as some kind of an antisocial persona in a way, which is counterintuitive to our view that mourning customs in Jewish in therapeutic, they're genius. But here you can see that it's a different way. So I got into it, and I was inside the text all the time. But after the divorce, I had to go into life, because living is actually being in contact with actual life and not in text. And that's what I understood in order to understand who I am. So in a way, the text I actually chose, Oliver, is about that, the fact that you can't put all your money or your cars on inner life and studying and text, which is a very Jewish thing to do, right? But you have to live in a way. And in a way, I'm just saying it as a Zionist. Zionism was a turn against exiled Jews that were either going out and forgetting their Jewish identity, but otherwise going inside. Again, it's a tension that you deal with every day. Whether or not to open yourself or to close yourself to the society you live in.
Okay. So it's a fascinating kind of journey. Take us a little bit slowly into the text, because for the listener, we'll put the links in the show notes to where all of the texts come from that we present on Really Jewish, but so you can look inside, as we say. But take us slowly into this Mishnah from Shabbat about both the text, a tiny bit of its context, and then how it relates to your story.
First of all, I love Mishnah. I just love Mishnah. Talking about what I said before, I love it and I'm addicted to it. And I wasn't surprised to hear that Chaim Nachman Bialik, the national poet of Israel in a way, which is he had a very complicated identity, but he was also fascinated by Mishnah. And I love Mishnah because Mishnah is law, but it's not a regular law. It's a law that encompasses the Jewish civilization in a way. In a few words, in a few disagreements, you can understand a lot about the consciousness of the legislators. It's true about Israeli law as well, but the fact, the Hebrew, the metaphors, the world of the Tanaim who wrote the Mishnah is so rich that in a way the Mishnah is actually favorable for me and other laws. So first of all, I love law, but I love Mishnah in particular. So I chose a Mishnah that says in Masechet Shabbat, that says, Dan mipnei adleka. The Mishnah says that with regard to all sacred writings, one may rescue them from the fire on Shabbat. The Mishnah gives a permission to go into this gray area of maybe breaking Shabbat because you try to actually save these scriptures from the fire. So maybe you will break Shabbat in a regular place. They won't allow it. But if there's a danger to Kitvei HaKodesh, to the scriptures, they allow it. And
so I'm just, for the sake of clarity, this is a hypothetical burning building, and in the hypothetical burning building, probably what we're talking about in the main is the Sefer Torah, which for many generations, including in the Tannaitic time in 2,000 years ago in the rabbinic period, probably there was some kind of cupboard. It wasn't fireproof in those days. There was probably at least one, if not more, Sifrei Torah, the 5 books of the Torah, the 5 books of Moses inside the ark in one scroll. So Kitvei HaKodesh is more broad than that. It's in the Mishnah, it goes on to say that in any language, and we're talking about lots of different scrolls potentially. But just for the imagination of the listener, we're probably talking, at least for where I go to, we're probably talking about the Sefer Torah in the synagogue, and the synagogue is burning. Also what's interesting here is it's a very visceral image, because kids are still at home, there are rockets still falling on Israel right now. There was parts of the holy sites hit in Jerusalem last night, and next to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, which is a Christian holy site. But there's something very visible about the possibility. I think one of the attacks in Beersheba was of a synagogue. Not very. This is something which is achshavi. It's of the moment in terms of the description that we're discussing. But you're also permitting this to be a personal exploration, a text which is personal to you. So tell us a little more about how it becomes personal and some of the scaffolding also that Bialik provides.
Right. I think, you're totally right. And Comparison is great. Wow. I think the Mishnah is basically. I'm not sure it talks about the Bet Knesset, the synagogue. It seems that it could be a home. And you have scriptures at home, but nevertheless, you're right. Yeah, we leave our house every siren. We leave our house and go to the shelter, and you never know what you come back. Actually, twice in the last 2 weeks, I left something on the stove, and when I came back after the siren, the house was full of smoke. And I actually repressed it until now. When you mentioned it, it's actually very scary when you think about it. And it happened to me. Yeah, and now I'm really strict about not leaving anything when we go out of the house. But Bialik in his very famous essay Halacha in Agada, he takes this halacha and he says, listen, this is a proof that there is no real distinction between halacha, the law, and Agada, the narrative, the story. Because every law is actually a story. Every law behind it, there's like a very rich, colorful picture of a life. I.e. here, there's a picture of a people who actually put the texts, in the first place. The texts are so important that you can actually, go into this gray area of maybe breaking Shabbat for them. And Shabbat is the most important, maybe the most important mitzvah in Judaism. Even me, as a secular, I don't keep an Orthodox Shabbat, but I keep Shabbat. Shabbat for me, even when I go out Friday night, yeah? Shabbat is Shabbat. Shabbat has a special smell, when I write on Shabbat, it's different. Yeah? Shabbat is a very special time for me. It's my father always says, as others, it's the best idea that Judaism gave to the world. The Megillat HaAtzmaut, the independence scroll says of Israel says, that we gave the world the Bible, Sefer HaSfarim HaNitzchi. I think we gave the world Shabbat. Shabbat is amazing. So you can break Shabbat. And Bialik says there is no real dichotomy between halacha and agada. And what I thought about is you have to take it one step further. You have to think about when you take this metaphor seriously, what it means is that you refer to the text, to the limud, to the ideas, you refer to them as human beings, because the most famous halacha in Shabbat is pikuach nefesh doche Shabbat. You can break Shabbat if someone is in danger. That's, understandable. But you can also go into this, very complicated situation if the texts are in danger. So you compare the text to a person who is a living person. That's a little bit alarming for me. That's also a thing that I have to take into consideration and not accept in the whole when I think about it.
So the description you're taking is that Kitvei HaKodesh and this exchange of whether we do or don't save the texts, and the fact that we know, like you say, the halacha, one of the most famous halachot of Shabbat is described, Pikuach Nefesh Doche Shabbat, saving a life. You save a life in all eventualities, even on Shabbat. That somehow this interacts with your own story of your own journey, of some kind of interaction, both with the importance of the tradition, but also somehow a distancing from the tradition.
And the sensitivity towards, I'm sensitive towards, and I always analyze laws as if they were poems, the best words in the best order, in a way. And I always pay attention to words, but it was like an alarm for me, or a lighting for me that says, Yair, don't forget life. Life is also important. You can't always dwell into texts, and you have to live, you have to love, you have to do things, you have to also take care of your body in a way. Everything that is connected to human journey in a way, and not inside this very rich realm of words that I tend to actually feel at home. That's what that's the home for me. I feel so comfortable. And people, when you think about it, meeting people, our conversation, Oliver, it's not easy when you think about it. That's to bridge. I'm not talking even about the cultural difference. I'm not talking about the different environment that we live in, me and, in Israel, Jerusalem, and you in England. I'm talking about the fact that two human beings are just, meeting, and it's not easy just to connect. It always threatened me in a way, and I'm always a little bit afraid of people. So I found the text so comfortable, and that's why, I came to this balance. I'm not there, but I want to go to be balanced and to just, enjoy and think about ideas in text, but also don't forget that there's life, there are bad bodies.
It feels very challenging as well. I think this dichotomy or this line between the secular and the religious, I think this is maybe terrain that I'll come to at some point. Describing in last week's podcast that I'm somebody who's become more religious over time. It's a fascinating journey for me, and I also think that in my own way I balance out between the secular and the religious. I take very seriously time outdoors and exercise and fun. I think there is latitude and parameters for fun in our own family, in our own lives, and that feels very important and articulated here. But I think also the point that you're making is it can be generalized, that there are lots of us. I often find at the end of the week when I get to Shabbat, for example, on some level, work is easier because it's a blackboard and it's a pen or it's a computer and it's a spreadsheet or a budget they have to write. It's tangible. That's also a part of what you're describing when you talk about text. That text is tangible. The Mishnah has been set for more than almost 2,000 years. And it's going to be the same. So when I open up the book of the Mishnah or whatever book it is, it's the same material. And the terrain of human interaction and even just having fun and living life outside of the synagogue, outside of the textual tradition is much more complicated, as are relationships. So it feels like healthy terrain to explore the dichotomy and explore the diversity between those two places.
Yeah, and I'm not judgmental about everybody's way of life and journey. There are people who they don't want relationships. That's fine. Everybody has his own journey in life. There are some people who don't want kids. That's fine as well. Everybody has preferences. There are people who are gay. There are people who are religious, who are secular. But my personal feeling is that relationship, as you, came out of your sayings, relationships are hard, and they're hard because they actually give you get a mirror of yourself every day, and that's not easy. Just to look at yourself through others' eyes, and you benefit from it. So I feel, not you, I feel that I benefited from it. And I'm happy, that I took the risk. But I still, every day, still now, I'm still very sensitive and sometimes hurt by people. And it's just, a risk that I feel I have to take. That's in order not to become a text myself, in a way.
I guess in that way where we've got to is some kind of... I often think that one of the Jewish exports is Shabbat, like you say. Like we shared some of that with the world, that the possibility of creating restful space or creating one day a week where you don't work. I also think that an aspect of Jewish strength is also management of transition. I think about it in relation to Havdalah, the ceremony that we light many wick candle at the end of Shabbat, to ease us past that day of rest and back into the week in the same way that we do that, light two candles at the beginning of Shabbat. I think there's something about Pesach, about cleaning, about that aspect of renewal that's presented in the possibility for a little bit of spring cleaning in our homes. There's something there about the possibility of recognizing they have the word in Hebrew, zorem, like the possibility of flowing from one passion or one force, one pole to another. In terms of how I understand your story and the text from Shabbat that you present, what you're really saying is we need to understand the poles and permit for both to exist. We can have passion in the material world, in the text that we study, in the work that we do, in the obsessions and connections to passion that we have, but then also permitting some kind of flow back into the human world, back into the vulnerability of the world outside is also really important. And certainly Bialik sounds like he may have intended that. Maybe the Mishnah itself intended that. Yeah, we're gonna move to wrap up in a couple of minutes. Just tell us 2 words about why then you teach and train in law, and tell us maybe 2 words about the life that you've built in Israel, and share us like what's the nukuda, what's the final final thought on this text.
The thought that is actually filling my mind now is about transitions. You thought we have to make a chapter on it, Oliver.
Okay,
transitions
great.
in religion, because as a divorced guy, and I have 3 kids from my first marriage, and transitions suddenly became very hard. Every divorced father or mother knows that the kids are coming and then they're going and then they're coming, and suddenly you are a bachelor and suddenly you are a father. Transitions are hard. We should talk about it. And obviously now I lead, I remarried, and I think in a very, and that's my concluding remark in a way, surprisingly enough, a person like me who thought I wouldn't have any kids when I was 18, thought that I would go into any relationship. Now I have 3 kids from my first marriage and another 3 kids from my second marriage, and I'm a father of 6, and fatherhood in a way is something that defines me. We didn't talk about it until now, but it's something very, very big in my life, and I feel good being a father, and there's something about it that is good for me, adequate. A big part of my identity is fatherhood. So I don't know how it's connected to the Jewish identity, but there is something about fatherhood and kabelet avicha v'et imecha and to it.
No, I think we're gonna have an episode on this as well, but I think
so. Yeah.
On one small level, the aspect of fatherhood, the aspect of parenthood is the preparedness to take other people on the journey. Similar to kind of the attempt of the podcast is, I have something to say and you're going to listen. Like that's
that's not my fatherhood.
No, but there's something about the possibility that you're willing to confer your wisdom and your understanding of the world onto another person. That's got to be a start.
But one of the feedbacks I'm going to read in a second is my son's, Yishai. Our relationship is not a relationship of me conveying my my ideas to him. It's a conversation, and Yishai is a very intelligent person that I learn from every day. So it's not authoritative as we grew up with our parents. It's more balanced in a way, yeah. Hopefully, he could learn something from me, but he's a different person than me. I accept that.
Okay, so we're gonna finish up this segment. I'm moved that we dip our toe in the water in each of these episodes, and there's always tons more to think of, and we're really willing to hear from our listeners, like where you'd like us to go next. We'll definitely do a episode on transitions. That sounds like a great episode. We'll definitely do something coming up on parenting fatherhood specifically, because we're both dads. I think exposed there was just the different life stages that Yair and I are at, because my kids are still tiny, so I have some kind of expectation or vision that they might listen to me, whereas Yair is has older kids who have stopped listening to him a long time ago.
It.
We're going to move to our Feedback Him. Feedback Him is a new segment that we introduced last week, which is just a little bit of feedback from the podcast so far, what people are saying on the street about Really Jewish. We are really excited to launch this podcast. We're now in our 4th week, I think, and our listenership is growing across the world. I've got one feedback from Rabbi Carey, who's in Los Angeles, a colleague that I graduated with from rabbinical school. She says, Rabbi Carey says, Really Jewish draws from thousands of years of Jewish history, memory and meaning making. How very Jewish to have this conversation. Also have Maya from Dublin, who says she really enjoyed the pilot and she's really appreciated how real and down to earth we are. I guess that's a call to carry on kind of some of the emotional honesty that we've tried to present up until now. Tell us what Yishai said, Yair.
Ishai wrote me, I've just finished listening to episode 2 of the podcast, and it was interesting to learn and hear about the different aspects of reconciliation with the original text. We talked about Ira Nidachat then. One thing though, he wrote to me, I would keep a flowing conversation going even if it means not getting into all the topic planned in the episode. The young generation.
It's lovely to hear about different people listening to the podcast. Let us know if you have feedback. I guess there's also the possibility to shout out, both to be in contact with us, and if you have ideas about how to move our podcast forward and want to help in its production, tell us. We'd love to support and help on this project. I want to say thank you this week to Yair for your honesty. We're going to also shout out to Oy Vavoy, who have provided a new musical addition to this podcast, both the intro and the outro. If you want to listen to their new single, Back to My Roots, it's available on all the streaming platforms. And we're even going to try here and announce gigs coming up with Oy Vavoy. And next week, maybe I'm going to tell you a story about meeting them for the first time. Thanks for being with us. Review this podcast wherever you listen to your podcast. Send it to a friend. Share our videos on Instagram, TikTok, or Facebook. We are building this project from the wheels up, and happy to hear from you about how to progress Really Jewish. You can also donate on our platform with Patreon if you want to financially support this podcast and our work. Thank you, Yair, for recording with me today, and wishing everybody well.
Thank you.